Oh, good morning, Kevin. How are
Good
you doing,
morning,
sir?
Chris. Oh, I'm doing well. Time is just flying by me this morning, though.
It sure is. Best day ever, huh?
Actually, we're gonna go down that rabbit hole again.
The
I looked for a couple of
best.
good memes on that this week, and I just didn't find Phineas and Ferb best day ever. But I know they said it. I know it. I need to go grab a short or
just,
something like that.
just absolute best day. Good morning,
Yeah.
everybody. Good to see everyone this morning. We got Donald here bright and early. Donald, how are you doing, buddy?
Yeah, he needs to. He started a good conversation in the chat, and then kind of needs to come back and re-engage again. But he says he
Yeah.
finally understands the difference between the SQL endpoint and the quote warehouse in Fabric.
Mm,
And he likes
okay.
warehouse instead of data warehouse. So I was hoping he could add his words of how he would summarize it. So up at
I'm gonna
6
say
a.m. he's getting the wife coffee. Nice.
I think I like the use of it too, just for brevity's sake. We're not talking about warehouses here, right? There.
Yeah, but the object name itself, right, is data warehouse, right?
I don't know. Does it actually call it a data warehouse? I
Well,
guess.
let's look. Let's look.
All
Let's
right,
yeah,
all
I
right.
mean there's a persona of data warehouse, right? Oh, and
It's
then here to
warehouse.
create it, it's create, right? So here. We
Yeah.
go all the way to the bottom. Data warehouse is the persona,
Mm,
and then creating the warehouse is the object. And I've been saying data warehouse as the object quite a bit.
okay. Well,
So
I mean, tomato, tomato. You know, let you know. I like to call it a warehouse just for brevity's sake too. So I agree with Donald. Uh, well, good morning, Enterprise AR. Yes, we're going to be digging into shortcuts today because Kevin pointed out last week as we were going through and showing the demos of what is a data mesh. Like I apparently breezed right past what a shortcut was, doing it but not talking enough about it. So we're going to head in on more of that. So. Good morning to Adam and Jason. Good to see everyone here. And Papendra, nice to see you. You might be new here. I sound a
wow,
bit different, huh? I
he
don't
must
know.
know you,
Yeah.
Patel. That's great.
Yeah.
And yes,
Good
yes,
deal.
Enterprise AR. I was able to drive on that short little drive. I'm an excellent driver on short trips, right? So,
Yeah.
but I also just figured out Zoom. It's Control 4 for the live Zoom, which would move the allows you to interactively work with everything as it's zoomed in. So the biggest trick was to
Whoa.
get back out of it. Control 4 again. I kept hitting escape to get out of it,
Oh, and that
but
doesn't do it.
you got to do Control 4 again to get out of it. So
Learn something new
um,
every day.
yeah,
Although I think
our
I've
Zoom
said
it
that before.
our
So,
Zoom it lesson for today, and I did it just because I thought I didn't have Zoom it started, and I clicked on it. The interface came up, and I says, "Oh yeah, what is it again?" And yeah, so got to do something during a countdown.
right, right, right. um, all right. Should we do? We have a few rules.
Let's do it.
All right. Rule one. Where'd it go? Uh, Please, this is all part of we're here to answer questions and talk to you, so let's make this a conversation. So if you have questions or comments, please post in the chat with a Q colon. It helps us make sure we get that queued up and get to it. I don't think we've had a live stream yet where we haven't answered all the questions that come in. So here's your challenge for today. Test us. See if we can get through all your questions. There's Don't think that's not going to be an issue for a while. So, and rule two, please don't repeat questions. That just clutters things up and makes things difficult. So don't do that. All right. But a question for you today. Are you currently using shortcuts, or is this just something that you've read about or don't know anything about? What's your status on the shortcut space? Is this something you know anything about? Yes or no? Leave the comment in the chat if you're using it. Also, love to hear how you're using it. With that said, do follow Kevin and myself over on X and LinkedIn. We do post stuff on a semi-regular basis. Some days more, some days less. And then, of course, don't forget to do the whole social media thing. So, like, subscribe, turn on notifications, all that good stuff. Because apparently, we've been doing the whole YouTube thing for over a year now. Can you believe that?
Oh, really? Wow. Did we miss our anniversary?
We did, right?
Man, blew right by it. Oh, well,
Ah.
you know, first year, it doesn't mean much, right?
Oh, good deal.
So I like Adam's question, right? Do Windows shortcuts count? And so do we need to kind of tone it in a little bit? Like, like, are we talking, do you use keyboard shortcuts, right? You never use the mouse? Always just kind of use keyboard shortcuts? What shortcuts are we talking?
all right. Apparently, I'm
Actually, you know
standing.
what? In the chat, if you use any of those, go ahead. Put them in there. we're we're
Oh,
we're a little he didn't use Q code. Damn it. Then we didn't answer it.
yeah. Yeah, we only queue up questions with a Q in it. You know how that goes
Uh,
down. All right. So, you want to give us the basics? What the heck is a shortcut, Kevin? Just
well, yeah, so
bring
let's
everyone
kind
up to
of
speed.
let's set the stage a little bit again, right? So last week you gave us excellent presentation on getting started with data mesh and the concepts around it, right? And as we progress through those concepts, you showed us within your tenant things that you already had set up to where you didn't have to copy the data around, but you ended up in another workspace and you had all these shortcuts. And the world was blown away, right? And I don't say that lightly, right?
I know where the National
Maybe I
Guard
do.
was called out to, calm people, and yes,
Yeah. Um,
it was quite intense.
but I really thought you did a great job putting that all together. I was thinking about it throughout the weekend and everything, and I said, the one thing that we didn't do is actually show the creating of the shortcuts. And so we were talking about what to do early in the week, and I said, yeah, let's at least show this. And so we're going to try to turn this into an episode. There's not a lot to it, but there is some things to kind of talk about. So we are depending on you guys in the chat to kind of give us more questions and places that you want to go with it. But um,
Well,
and
hang on.
and
What is a shortcut, though?
so what is a shortcut? So a
Yes.
shortcut in One Lake allows you to, without having to copy the data, kind of just point to it, right?
Hmm.
Um, and then you'll have very similar permissions. And I was reading on some of that this morning. There's a preview part on data access roles that I haven't gotten into. But anyways, without having to copy the data from one place to another, you're going to point to it, right? And I know Adam kind of tongue in cheek put out Windows shortcuts, right? But it's a very same concept, right? Shortcuts that we tend to use within things like OneDrive, right? Windows and stuff like that, right? We're not copying the file around, but we wanted it accessible in another place so we could produce that type of shortcut and have properties to it. Very, very same, similar concept. And it allows you to do this with Azure. So the Azure Data Lake, or not Azure, sorry, ADLS Gen 2, right? The blob storage. It allows you to do it to that. So now that's outside of the Fabric kind of framework. It allows you to do it to Amazon Web Services. I'm pretty sure, yeah, Google Cloud. I thought at one time that I must have been mistaken, but I kind of thought Snowflake was there or not. But I don't work a whole lot with Snowflake. Um, but I thought it was there, but I don't see it listed here.
You
So
can't you can't shortcut to Snowflake as of yet.
Okay.
But you can do a mirror, and that's different though.
And I'm glad you brought that up because somebody else asked me about that when I was okay, and Adam's confirming it only has mirroring. Because somebody asked me that when I kind of brought it up in a conversation that we were looking at doing shortcuts. And so the difference of shortcut versus mirroring, right? So mirroring, a mirror of something is copying the data over. It's just Fabric infrastructure is doing that copy activity, the heavy lifting of the copy activity for you. Would you say that's a valid
Yeah,
summarization of that?
yeah, I think that's a good summarization. The summarization I like between the two, and hang on, let's zoom in, or let's up, deep, up,
Mhm,
the way I think of it is shortcuts go directly to the files that you're going to be accessing that are in a file system, right? So
mhm,
S3 buckets you mirror in. Google Cloud going to CSVs or Delta files or whatever the heck it is you're going uh, into Google Cloud, right? Like you do a shortcut to that. You would do a shortcut to other lakehouse items that are inside Fabric so that it could just
mhm,
stay there and you could use it because it's a shortcut. You're just going directly to the file. That's shortcutting. Mirroring is when you have to go to a database of some sort where
mhm.
the file or the data that you're accessing may not natively be in a file format. Now,
Right.
I mean, Snowflake is in whatever file structure they have it as, right? And same thing with SQL Server. And I don't know what the details are, but
Yeah, it
you
doesn't matter,
can,
right?
yeah, it
It's
doesn't matter, right? You can mirror those in and it's somewhat like semi-real time updating of the data that goes into the Snowflake or SQL Server is then
mhm,
brought into Fabric and made accessible for you. But you don't have to manage the sync. You don't have to manage that. Oh, iceberg parquet. Yeah.
yeah,
You don't have to manage all of that. You just configure the mirror, and then you're up and running. So that the mirror is which we look for Snowflake or for SQL Server or for like Oracle or like
yeah, right.
Redshift or any of those databases that are out there, right?
Cosmos is there today,
Cosmos.
right?
Yep, yep, yep,
Yeah,
yep.
yeah, I don't think, like, Oracle is there today, but your concept is right, like, if Oracle could come along into the future, and it just might, right? Because
Hmm.
what it appears in, the ones that I've looked at is mirroring is using the change data capture concept
Yep.
implemented in that whatever your source system is, right? And as long as it has some type of change data capture mechanism, and I use that term, and I know SQL Server uses it very specifically,
Hmm.
right? But a way of allowing you to very quickly find out what was changed without having to pull the entire table again, right? And then pull just those small changes over. So,
Right.
and that's what makes it very efficient. And people have been writing
And yeah,
Azure Data
AR
Factory,
said,
SSIS, other things that use
oh,
that forever. And this, they did all the heavy lifting, put it in a nice, easy way for you to use.
right, right. And Enterprise AR is saying, so Mirror is copying with built-in automation to keep the data up to
Hmm.
date within your Fabric copy. And yes,
Hmm.
that's correct, right? And Fernando is asking, is mirroring to data warehouse what copy activity is to data pipelines? I would actually say it's closer to change data capture, uh, CDC, than it is
Right.
to the copy activity. It's
It,
similar though.
Well, and behind, I mean, I don't know this for sure, but behind the scenes, the initial load
Hmm.
could be the copy activity, right?
Yeah.
If they've determined that's the most efficient way to, because, if you've had something out there for a long time, you got to bring over, very quickly everything and then start syncing it from there, from whatever point that you're at. It may use a copy activity to initialize it. But
Yeah.
then from there, it wants to use these very small sets of data being transformed over using CDC.
Yeah. So I'm gonna say Enterprise AR has a great question that was up. We almost passed it because it was
Hmm.
dumb and issued a challenge and wasn't ready watching the chat for this. uh So at a high level, shortcuts only live in a single tenant. Is that correct, Kevin, or no?
I don't think they have to,
Mm-hmm.
because I mean, let's just take it to an extreme, right? If you're going to Amazon, that's not within your tenant, right?
Mm-hmm.
So definitely it doesn't have to there.
Yep.
Um, and if you have set up whatever security you need to get to an ADLS Gen 2 file that's in a different tenant, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know all the security setup, but let's take worst case scenario. You made that public, right?
Yep.
You could shortcut right to that path, right, and
Yep.
set it all up and everything. So as long as you have security access to it, and it's one of these supported, the ADLS Gen 2, right? And let's kind of go down to that right here. See if it kind of talks a little bit about what file path, right? Because you're going to put in your connection string
Mm-hmm.
in here. So you could see, let me bring this up just a little bit here, right? If you were using ADLS Gen 2 and you use the shared access signature, right? This doesn't necessarily have to be within your same tenant then, because you are providing some type of credential. In this case, it's showing the SAS, right? And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you could go across tenants because of it.
Yep. That is exactly right. This means that shortcuts are more than just uh more than just something for within Fabric, right?
Right.
Now you can create shortcuts and you can use that information to then distribute information with either within your organization or outside of your organization. So
Hmm.
you're starting to look at how can I like monetize my data platform, and I need to be able to do that at scale because I don't necessarily want to pay for the compute of someone to be hitting my analysis services models, right? Like I want to pay for the compute of them to hit my semantic models. You can give them access to the one lake, and then they can run that and manage that themselves.
Right. Yeah. So, and then, with the example that you showed last week with the data mesh, it was all contained within Fabric, right?
Yep.
So you
Yep.
can do it just within Fabric. And if you wanted to call that one Fabric, that one lake is only one exists within that tenant, right? So, yeah, now that's all going to be within the same tenant, and that's what we'll kind of show a little bit more of today. Kind of thinking about that data mesh. You may have, one workspace or lake house that you're doing your shortcuts to your external type of
Hmm.
stuff in order to manage that, and then shortcut that into a different workspace from there, right? In order to reuse it across different models or whatever. So I would imagine you could get into this gnarly, spaghetti pathing of lineage and everything. So you do have to think about how you're going to document your lineage, where that's going to come from, how to know where things are coming, from and everything. So I'm not sure.
So enterprise AR is saying so big corporate has commercial tenant, a sub company has GCC high tenant. That sub company could use the commercial tenant. This is a live setup right now. Uh,
Throwing
so
throwing an interesting twist in there, because when you throw GCC high into anything, the rules are different, right?
yeah, and I will say GCC High does not have Fabric yet. So yeah, the answer would be no today. Tomorrow, the answer. Well, we'll have to see how this all evolves. GCC High is always behind, because they've got to lock everything down. They've got
Eh,
their special zones and regions, and
Right. And I
the
would,
URL isn't even the same for any of this stuff in GCC High. It's
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine, because we're saying GCC high, right, that it would never really want to jump and connect into anything that is kind of considered public, right?
Mhm.
They wouldn't want to expose anything in that way, right? Just because that's how it has to be locked down.
So I'm working at GCC High right now, and that is an interesting challenge because it is, yeah, it is it is.
Yeah.
It's odd because like everything you touch is iterations in the past at some
Mm-hmm.
iteration in the past of what you're working with, and feels like every app is at a different layer, and so it's like, oh yeah, that one was like, what was that like in 22? Oh yeah, it was how we worked with it in 22. It's that's an
Yeah.
interesting challenge for anyone in the GCC high place. Godspeed, Godspeed.
Yeah. Yeah, and thanks, Adam. He keeps giving us more information. I like the way that he says it. Right, think of it like a DMZ. It's not exposed, right, and the opposite's going to be true, right?
Yeah,
There's very strict rules of how things can kind of get in, right?
yeah.
Um,
It does suck. You're right.
yeah,
I mean, for security reasons, right? Like they've got to go through all this extra overhead, and I totally get it. You know, spying and like we don't want whatever the bad
yeah,
guys
yeah,
do bad things. So
right. I mean, it's bad enough our social security numbers are all over the place, right? What else do you want flying everywhere?
there you go. Well, yeah, didn't AT&T like distribute them all like 380 million or something like that? I thought I heard. You got it.
I get I get free identity checking or whatever that letter is that I have to address in the next month, right? But yes,
Free identity checking for 12 months. Oh,
yeah,
thanks AT&T.
exactly.
Thank you for putting a deadline and a clear time in which the fraudsters just have to hold off, right? Like,
And you have to take action by a certain date or you don't get it, right? So, you
yeah,
know.
yeah. Thanks AT&T.
All right, we
Yeah,
wow, left
we're
turn. Now, if anybody wants to know more about me, just go to the dark web, find AT&T's files, anything you want to know.
I have the same letter. I just don't know where it is, and I'm sure I'll miss it
Um,
because my name was in a different data breach, and I got 3 years of that monitoring. So I'm like,
oh
yeah,
wow.
I'll just rely upon that versus dealing with the AT&T BS, right? So like at this point, like you wonder how much actually.
Dark.
Dark Kevin. Okay, all
Wow.
right, Dark
It is
Kevin.
Friday.
Yeah, it is
It was
Friday.
a shortcut. Yeah, it was a
Oh my
shortcut to everything.
gosh. Oh, that's good.
All right. What else do we need to talk about on shortcuts before
All
we
right, I
kind of
think we
show
hit.
we
Uh,
show Kevin failing at a demo? So
yeah, well, so in other words, regardless of where your data is in the cloud, you can do a shortcut and you can use the
hmm
data in place. You don't have to manage the syncs. Someone asked me a question about this, and I was pretty sure I knew the answer, but I wasn't 100% sure. Now I know on mirroring, Microsoft has said that we don't have to pay for storage, right? They've come out
hmm
and said that. What about shortcuts? Because a shortcut, what it actually does is it creates a mirror between that file and in one lake, and so that file is still there. And they keep it in sync, and they do all this like Josh Kaplan and team has this crazy like syncing mechanism there. Is there a cost of that storage?
Um.
Uh,
So what I'm seeing in this article, right,
mhm.
is they use instead of using the word mirroring, is they're using caching,
Okay, caching.
right? So um, having cache, right, it's going to reduce the egress cost, right? It also allow you to kind of have access to everything faster, obviously, right?
Okay.
Um, is this big enough? I can make it a little bit bigger. Do that. So it looks like the files are retained for 24 hours. Do, 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 do. And I don't see anything that's talking about the billing, the charges for that. Um, Up to a point, Adam. See, Adam's doing great talking to us in the chat today. Up to a point on storage piece depends on the capacity skew. Yeah,
Okay, so you get
there's a
some.
there's a dollar. So
Okay. All right. Okay. And we still have a degree of egress cost, but the egress cost is not every time I access it. It's the one time for the sync, and then that file is then cached. When you go to access it again, it rapidly kind of does like, okay, what's my latest file, update date on it, and then it picks, if it goes back to AWS or wherever, or to the shortcut cache piece, right?
yeah,
Okay, that makes sense.
and what I would imagine, right, is whatever cost exists for pulling something out on the other side, right?
Hmm.
I mean, Microsoft's not in control of that, right?
Hmm.
So if Amazon is charging you whatever per S3 bucket, you're going to be consuming that cost on how it gets it too. But what this implies or is explicitly saying, right, is they're very much aware of that and trying to think of ways by using caching, right, in order to help reduce that on either side.
Right, right. And I think Enterprise AR is summarizing it. So the idea is you can have a single data hub workspace domain for each workspace or domain with Fabric, and then shortcut all of your workspace domains back to it. And I guess yes, as long as you think of each hub being like, okay, I'm the data set owners, as data set owners or data owners, I manage the items that are inside my space. So my workspace, I manage those content items. So I manage the loads, I manage what they're up, I manage the SLAs, all that stuff on them. Then I share shortcuts to other places, and then other domains are able to, build and manage their own content and just use a shortcut in. That is where. Did we talk about surrogate keys last week? Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did. And Adam has
Yeah.
just did a great video on surrogate keys. Go look at that. The surrogate keys should be shortcuttable and relatable inside of that like master hub that then the other domains use, so that as they load and as they create their data ownership, they follow that common platform surrogate key for those business keys. Okay. Um, so yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. And then
Yep.
different workspaces can use different capacities to manage costs. That is spot on.
Thanks, Adam.
Yep. I'll see you later, buddy. Um,
See you
and
tomorrow.
that actually leads us right into the question that's way up at the top. And Bhupendra, I hope you didn't think we were skipping over you, but like we try to grow the questions up. But yes, um, uh, you might have many different capacities for your different layers, especially if you're trying to like really manage your costs and manage what's going on. And let's say you have an F64 for your bronze layer for all your copy in content. You're landing your data. It's just your raw data, but you still need a lot of compute in order to do that because you've got a lot of data that goes in. You might have that in one workspace that you're using, and you manage your capacity there. Your silver layer, maybe that's an F64, or I'm sorry, you F64 on the other one. This is an F128 for your silver, because you're now doing like your joins, your business logic, all of that good stuff. You start to apply that in your silver layer. That silver layer would use shortcuts from your bronze to populate your silver, right? Um, and then your gold would be a different capacity, and maybe that's an F256, right? Um, that you're using to do everything at your model layer, and you're using a lot of compute inside that, adding in more business logic or really complex transformations or whatnot. You would use shortcuts from your silver layer into your gold, and from there in your gold, that's where you'd be direct linking out to your semantic models and then your Power BI reports. Kevin, is any comments on that?
No, you did a great job.
Okay.
And I was looking at other stuff, so
All right.
Full disclosure. I knew you were doing great, but I was looking at something and all of a sudden I got distracted. So it happens.
That's fine.
At least I'm honest. So, as always, one of the things you should do, right, in pulling up this documentation is go into the limitations and considerations, right? So that's kind of what I was scanning through. I was trying to prep to move forward a little bit. So I'm not going to read all these to y'all. I'm sure everybody's very capable to read, but there is a limit on the shortcuts per fabric item. And I would like an understanding of what item means, right? Does that mean I could have 100,000 shortcuts to a table, or is that 100,000 to the lake house? Is the item the warehouse? Um, that term is just let's see. So that refers to apps, lake houses, warehouses. So it's at that level and more. So that had more. So you kind of got to think about that. If you're hitting 100,000 shortcuts to a lake house, you may want to think about some stuff. Okay, and then the next one is to the path, right? So the path, I would think of like the individual file, the individual table. That's limited to 10, right? So you are going to kind of have to, and then direct shortcuts to shortcut is 5. Okay,
Right there.
Yeah.
Look, right there. No, bottom one.
The lineage?
Yep.
Yeah.
So this morning, Kevin and I were debating how the heck does lineage work for shortcuts. We've been having problems trying to figure this one out. Oh, right there. It's the last limitation.
Well, but it does, and we'll show because I'll get into the lineage view here in a little bit, right? When we set up the demo, but yeah, I was still having trouble even with a warehouse. So lineage for shortcuts to data warehouses and semantic models is not currently available. But I couldn't even tell when I had a lake house shortcut to another lake house, and I looked at the lineage view. Maybe just something didn't update, but I couldn't tell which specific table I was linking to. So, but we can kind of get into that. Maybe I just didn't see something in my short time that I looked at this type of stuff this week. So let's escape out of this. Knock this window down. Okay, so what I have here is a very simple setup so that if you at home wanted to try to do this as well, I'm going to increase my font here a little bit. Is I set up 3 workspaces. I just called it sample lake house. So I just used, I set up a workspace, said create a lake house, and I told it to put the sample data into it. Same with the data warehouse, right? And I had it put the fabric sample warehouse data in. And now this one, let me get out of what I have here. I set up just a warehouse called shortcuts and a warehouse lake house for shortcuts. And when I open this, you'll see I hopefully I deleted this one too. Yeah, everything is empty in this one. All right, so let's kind of just go back. We'll look to see what's here. And this produced a table that is public holidays, files, has a README text, images, sample data sets, right? So we could turn these other Parquet files into tables or whatever. But okay, so this gives us our structure. So if we come over here, and I want to just make sure we're going to go into the lake house. And I got to bring it down because I can't get to that. There we go. So I have a neat little object. I could just do new shortcut. It's very, very simple interface. I was really happy when I kind of started goofing with this the other day, right? So you could do your internal sources, right? So the fabric itself. Here's all those external sources we were talking about. I did try to mess with Dataverse, but I don't have anything with Dataverse on this tenant. This is my dev tenant. So we're going to just choose Microsoft OneLake, and then it presents to me everything available within this fabric tenant. And so we're looking for what's in um, fabric sample lakehouse. So I'm going to choose that
But
one.
but hang on a second.
Sure.
No, you can filter on those tabs up on top. So just your data or things that are endorsed or things that you've favored.
Yeah.
All right. So don't forget about endorsements and favoriting data, because if there's like some tables that you use all the time, mark that as favorited so that you can easily link back to that and reuse that stuff, and you're not accidentally grabbing the wrong customer table, right?
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially because if you've linked, right, from one place to another, and remember those limitations, once you create a shortcut, you could only create 5 shortcuts off that shortcut, right? But you could have more back to the actual lake house itself. So you do want to make sure that you get it from the correct place. Yeah, and then you could do your keyword or hit drop down and just say I want to see lake houses, um, all kinds of fun stuff. All right, so I'm going to select my sample lake house 4 that it produced for me, and then expand tables to pick public holidays. I could see. Oh, that's interesting. It shows me the delta log. I would have thought it would have showed me the table structure. I don't think I want to connect to. I wonder why it would show me this. I don't think I want to connect to this level of it. So,
No.
okay. So now I could come in here. Oh, and I could click edit if I
Hmm.
want to change the name. And so if you wanted to keep some type of naming standard that helps you know where it came from, you could do that. Or, I would recommend that you try not to change names a whole lot, right? Because you do want to have some common naming pattern that, like you don't want to just all of a sudden call customers people or, something to that effect. I don't know. But just to show you can do it by hitting this edit button. I love this yet to come status, yet to come. Oh, yet to create. So okay, I do have once I'm editing, I have to hit my little check button, and now my create's available again. Fernando, yeah, Fernando put in the chat table name underscore shortcut, maybe, right? We'll kind of get there a little bit in a second. All right, so now we have our shortcut created, and we know it's a shortcut because the icon is different. And Chris, you showed this a bunch last week, right? So
Yep.
we could see that it is a shortcut. So, maybe we don't need to put the word shortcut into it because we have some visual cue. But if
Mm.
we're using it somewhere else in a different SQL endpoint here or something like that, do we need to know it? Maybe, maybe not. Again, as you're devising out your architecture, your best practices, your standards, you have to kind of think about it. Now, this is where I'm going to kind of jump real quick to, we know we have a shortcut, and I'm going to go to my lineage view. And we could see that this is showing us we have fabric shortcuts coming up. This is our lakehouse name here, and it produces the analytics endpoint, produces the model. And we could see that it is pointing to our sample lakehouse 4.
Okay.
And show lineage here. Yeah, there's not much more. But what I'm not seeing is anything that tells me these specific table or tables. In this case, we know it's one.
Actually, I think this at least tells you where you're going, right? Like it
Right.
tells you some of the lineage, and you could get into the ballpark, so you could start to at least guess. I know most organizations have far more workspaces than they have individual items in the workspace, right?
Mm,
Right, like
that's an interesting point. I would like to get it one step further, right? Because I
sure,
would like to have that full lineage view down to that object that I'm shortcutting. So, that was kind of one little thing. But yes, this is definitely better than nothing. I was hoping maybe the bigger version of Purview might show
mm,
it. I kind of looked at the admin stuff. I think I don't know that I want to totally call this out, but I think in this tenant, my Purview. Oh, it's refreshing again. Huh.
yay!
Something broke on it the other day, and I was like, man. So I couldn't. This is all live, and this is where I could screw up again. And this obviously, since I just created it, it might not be all set up. But I would start trying to, hope that maybe on our Purview report, or maybe the bigger version of Purview, um, that's put into Azure might tell us that or something like that. But
Don't
this
go
is
any
where I would
further
look.
on this one. Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing in this tenant, so it doesn't.
Okay. All right.
This is
Good.
this is a pure dev tenant. Everything is
Okay.
just
All right. All right.
yeah,
All right.
yeah,
You're starting to get into something where it's like, oh,
yeah. No, this is
yeah,
nothing. There is nothing but Contoso or um, whatever,
Adventure Works and
Adventure
all the
Works and
others.
stuff like that on this.
Okay. All
Definitely.
right.
Yeah, just for that reason. All right, so that's the overwhelming demo of of getting a shortcut to. But let's kind of also go back a little
Oh,
bit. Sorry, I was
all
my
good.
overwhelming demo of getting a shortcut um to the lake house. Now I could do another overwhelming demo of right here's another method of coming in saying I want
Mm,
to start a new shortcut, right?
yep.
And I'm going to pick another object or so this time I want to get to a warehouse and I want it to be in my fabric sample warehouse. So I can easily link to tables that exist within a lake house or into a warehouse, right? And it's all the same steps. So we'll go through here very quickly. So now I have objects from two different places in here. Ooh, okay. I was like, man, that icon was different for a second, but now they're the same. I was like, does it really show me anything? Is there a little piece of data here telling me that, what it is? So, but everything looks the same from there, right? If we go back into our lineage view, and I think this is what that final statement was, right? So we have a connection to the warehouse, but we're not seeing this lineage view here. So you remember what you had me underline?
Yeah.
So when I'm connecting my fabric shortcut lake
Now it's
house
gone.
back to a warehouse, that's not showing in the lineage view right now.
Mm.
Yeah, 10 days left. So in 10 days, when I come back, by the way, I'll be gone for at least the next week. Um, this
Oh
this
no. Is
tenant
it ending?
this tenant's going to end in 10 days. It's going to be gone while I'm out of the country. It's going to end for me. So
Well,
yeah.
that's not a good sign.
On the one when I come back, we may have a session on how I'm going to get around this. So I
Well,
haven't.
I'll say the nice thing about like an F2 is how inexpensive it is, and the ability to start and stop it makes it really affordable, right?
Yeah, I'll have to go back and look. Because this is that off that Dev 365
Oh, okay.
subscription, and I can't remember if we're even allowed to put a credit card and paid items on there. We might be able to.
Oh,
I
okay.
haven't had to yet, but um, okay. So
Wait, you have a what? A Dev 365 subscription?
uh huh.
I don't know what that is.
So, and I think they're limiting them now,
Oh, all
but
right then.
you could, when you set up a development 365 subscription, it gives you 25 E5 licenses,
Okay.
um, and you could just set up and use it. And obviously, Power BI is there as well. So there's Teams, everything else that you want to be able to do. It's a great thing. It's one of the few videos I have up on my YouTube channel of
Mm-hmm.
how I initially set it all up and everything. So
Oh, I
some of the
remember that. Yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, I gotta
yeah,
go check that out.
yeah. So, but yeah, I'm gonna have to kind of think about. I have a plan that I'm not going to reveal because I don't know if it works or not. But I have a plan on how to work around the trial. Oh, I shouldn't say that because then Microsoft's going to get me. We'll see. We'll see. Okay, so this was kind of I think what's going to be coming is that this lineage view will hopefully in the future show that I'm going to that other warehouse.
Okay.
Okay, so let's go back to our um, and this a little bit makes sense to me is when I have a warehouse object, if I come into here, I don't have any way of producing shortcuts. Right? So shortcuts are something that are supported only into the lakehouse object. Now, because I could do a query here, right? Because it all shares the same SQL endpoint, I can query what I just shortcut into my lakehouse that's in the same workspace in my warehouse, right? But I can't do my own shortcuts here. That did I explain that okay, Chris? To kind of know let people
Wait,
know what the
you
limitations are.
can't do shortcuts inside a warehouse?
I haven't found a way to do it. There's no interface here.
Well, that's disappointing about that.
Yeah, everything that I've seen is the shortcuts are strictly to the lake house. Go into right.
Mm-hmm.
Go into the lake house. They don't go into the warehouse.
What about get data?
Yeah, there's no shortcut.
Okay. What
And
about the gear? Anything there? Dag nabbit, I thought we were using shortcuts. That's disappointing.
yeah. Now, like I said, I could query if I'm going to produce. See if I can remember the name good enough. But if I say select asterisk from, I think it's going to be, yeah, fabric shortcuts.
Oh, it is only in lake houses. That's disappointing.
And I think it's date, right? We'll see. It'll either run or it won't.
It's disappointing. That means we have all sorts of replication. I don't like
Well, you
that.
don't have to do replication, right? Because you could put a lake house there. So you see in the warehouse,
Yeah,
right?
but if you're using a warehouse, that means replication.
It doesn't mean replication. I'm maybe we're using the term differently,
Well, you're duplicating the data. Sorry. You know,
but
if you need let's say the customer table. It's in your
in,
central lake house, right? And you
mhm,
want it in a department's data warehouse, right?
okay.
That means you can't do a shortcut to that customer table. You
But
have to load it into the warehouse.
why couldn't I, in the same workspace, put a lakehouse object, shortcut to that, right? And now here, I just did, here's my query to the object that's within this same workspace. This is my lakehouse date. save that as a view. Sitting like something. But if I got my view to work correctly, right? Now I didn't have to
Mhm.
copy, and I'm shortcutting through using a view. Thinking, thinking, thinking.
Wait, how did you do that?
So if I could get this for whatever reason, this didn't work.
Oh, okay.
It didn't like my select statement, but
Oh, okay.
oh, you know why? Because I had that highlighted. So if I say,
Can you run that?
yeah, if I run this, I'm gonna get my dates right here. So I didn't copy any data,
Oh,
right? So I'm using my three-part naming
yep.
by calling, here's my lake house name, calling and asking it for the DBO date object, and I get this data,
Mm-hmm.
right? Let me click off because that's what I think it didn't like. Okay.
Well, so why don't you just write the create statement?
Why? Because a create is going to copy
Here's
the
it right
data.
there.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
Create
the
as
create.
view.
Yeah, yeah. I did. It failed earlier because I had something selected incorrectly.
Oh.
Because I stink at demos, right? Because I have to have failures. But yes, that's the point I was trying to get. I figured out that I had this highlighted, and that's when,
Oh,
right? So
that's why it
now,
doesn't work. Okay, so you
yeah,
can.
yeah. So
You
you
just do it
can.
as
I
a
had to
view.
highlight this whole thing, but here's my view.
Mm.
Now, now I have it in my warehouse through
Mm.
a shortcut from my lake house. So it does require me to create an extra object in my workspace if my intent was only to create Fernando. I'm the demo god. Um, but if I only wanted to create the warehouse in that workspace, it does then force me to create another lake house just to do the shortcutting. And then
But
I'd have to create these views in order to do it, but I didn't have to copy data anywhere.
I think the views are acceptable. That this is how you could access it. It's just not. There's no GUI, and I'm okay. I'm okay with that, especially because now it'll show up. I mean, now you have that object, so you can write that select statement on that date table there
Hmm.
in the same way you would in the host system. So a
Yeah,
query between the lake house, a basic SQL query between the lake house and the warehouse will run in both places and will yield the exact same results. And
yeah,
so that passes that passes, right? That
yeah.
works.
Yeah, it becomes a little more of a struggle again with the lineage, right? And we'll
Hmm.
see where the lineage progresses from because now, you've moved out from a couple different things. But I agree. I think it's acceptable. I think it's a great way to do it so that you don't have to copy the data, right? Because that is, to me, is one of the biggest downfalls is copying data, keeping it all in sync, stuff like that. That's what tends to kill architectures quite a bit. Sometimes there is a point that because you want to copy it, you want to change it, but then you're doing the proper ETL part for that.
Right. Like you
So
may want a snapshot of data. And to me,
sure.
that makes sense, right? Like, okay, hey, you're going to add in a date that's your snapshot date, and you're going to load it on that date, and it's going to capture how everything was on that date, right?
Hmm.
But if you're not doing that, this I like a lot because that create statement. Do you actually have that there? Did that? Do you still have that?
You could always regenerate it.
Yeah. So that is like just basic SQL statements, right?
Right.
So
Right.
we could script all of that into so you can use it like you can do what Kevin did here, right? Really
Hmm.
easy to write this, create this. That was simple, right? But what we could also do is we could bundle this together inside of a DevOps and a deployment package so that if I had a team that wanted to do work, that I was going to spin up a new analytics team, and I wanted them to have the ability to
Mhm.
contribute into their warehouse without breaking mine, I could like automate the build of their workspaces and the build of their warehouse and then the build of all the views that would be going from the central assets, and then they'd have free reign to build out the items that they wanted to build out in their actual warehouse. Yeah, I like that a lot.
So the one thing that you use the word modify, I think, in there, and I think what we'd have to be careful and kind of dissect all the way through, and we don't have time today, um, because we're in the SQL engine here,
Hmm.
right? I couldn't do an update against this view and update the table because that table originally lives, I think, in a Spark engine. This date one doesn't. I wonder how
But
all
that's
of that.
okay. I don't.
Yeah.
So anything that's a view from somewhere else, I don't want them to be able to update or make changes to. Right?
To
Like
the
that should be.
underlying data. Okay,
Yeah,
so I might have heard that wrong, but I
yeah.
heard,
I apologize.
like,
Maybe I
yeah,
said it like that, but
but
like I
if we're
want.
modifying data, we are going to have to copy it. So, okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I want them to live in their space, in their data warehouse, where the
Hmm.
tables that they build and manage, they can build and manage. They can do whatever the hell they want to it. Right? But then I want to be able to give them automatically a set of tables that the enterprise has said, yes, they should have that, right?
Yeah.
And then, we could even rig that into like, uh,
Yeah, you could script it all out, right? And then, like you're
yeah, yeah,
saying,
you could
you
you
could
could
script.
script it based upon access permissions and like, okay, these AD groups have access to these items.
Hmm.
When though that role gets access to these AD groups, then you build out these 100 items for them, or 75, or
Right. Well,
15.
taking it all the way back to your data mesh presentation,
Mm-hmm.
right? You had the common core set, right, of data, right? Common
Yep.
dimensions or whatever. And then we kind of talked about, well, you set up a new workspace for your onboarding HR or whatever. And now
Yep.
you want them to have access, this date table. Everybody uses the exact same date table. Well, you put
Yep.
that in one workspace, and then as you script out how you build HR's workspace or whoever you're onboarding, it just
Mm-hmm.
automatically makes that available to them by
Oh my
doing these
gosh.
shortcuts.
And then, oh, get this. Okay, so you onboard brand new HR analytics team, right? Like
Hmm.
HR's been growing. They were at 5 people, they're at 10 now. They need their own analysts because okay, they're starting to get complex stuff. HR's grown to 20 people and now that team's grown. So they're getting to the point where HR says, hey, we want to start to manage and own the employee data. Well, IT's owning it today. So shortcut in the employee stuff. HR could start to take over and have
Hmm.
their own employee tables and own employee assets. And then when they finally reach the point where they're like, "Hey, we're able to own this," boom, you could okay, that shortcut could they could create shortcuts to their table that they're providing out, and people could start to rotate over to the new employee
Right.
data content and off of the other.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, yeah, that's great.
Whew.
uh
We made it.
yeah,
I
Donald
know
is asking a great
we got a
question.
great question and we're pushing time.
Yeah,
I'm
we
good.
are
So,
nearly at time. And for this answer, it's really quick and simple. Go ask Mim. He has details on all of this. So, um,
in the few things that I've looked at, please don't take this as the authoritative answer, but
mhm.
Spark seems to perform a whole lot better. It takes the least CUs working with the largest amount of data.
Yep.
I had something that I had to go through the other day, and I happen to have it already in Spark. And I think when I first tried it, because I was like, oh, I could write the SQL to change this really quickly, and I could never get it to return. I rewrote it in Python with Copilot's help, and it performed extremely quickly. You're right. I mean, it was, I don't know, a few 100,000 rows that I had to pivot a certain way,
Hmm.
um, and it the Spark did it a whole lot faster, and it seemed to do it a whole lot cheaper. So
yeah, and that's one where I think it is going to be heavily on. It depends, but
yep.
Because I think there's also like if you're in one table, Spark is much faster, but if you have to do multi joins, then Warehouse becomes faster. If you're doing lots and lots of joins, then the semantic model and the tabular engine
Mm-hmm.
becomes faster, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're going to be in lots of depends on your performance and situation going
Yeah.
forward. But we are
But
at
but
time,
it's
and we
nice
got
to
to
have the
fly.
options. We do
Yes,
have to fly. Chris,
thank you
thank you.
guys. Go ahead, Kevin.
I was going to say thank you so much. Thank you to the audience. There's a lot of great chat today too.
Yep.
So as I mentioned, I will be gone next week. I'm leaving Chris on his own. Please join in and take care of him.
You see, Kevin does all the heavy lifting on this show, so
Yeah, right.
without Kevin around, it is going to be a struggle. So, awesome! Hey, everybody, continue having the best day ever. Love to keep touch with us on social media. Over on LinkedIn, Twitter, all that stuff. Hit us up. Let us know what you got going on. But you guys have just a great weekend. We'll see you next week. All right.
All right.
Peace.
Peace.
Digital combines strategic industry insight and advanced technical expertise to uncover and solve your digital transformation challenges. If you're interested in learning more, check out our website at bakertilly.com/digital.